In Our Silence, this a cappella song cycle was a very quick development back in May of 2020. We had planned a regular, normal, traditional opera season at Chautauqua with 20 young artists and 4 guest artists. And of course, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit and it was decided that there would be no face-to-face programming at the institution, everybody at the institution really had to figure out what was going to happen. We still had a platform, we still had a voice, we still had a role in amplifying the voices of our company, of our specifically, especially our 20 young artists who had accepted contracts to come and work with us this summer. And so we immediately went into gear trying to figure out how we could most effectively do that, give them all of the support and training that they would have expected to get from us in a season at Chautauqua, and use our platform to amplify the voices of these 20 wonderful young singers who we had made commitments to and who had made commitments to us. So we started exploring what a cappella solo music was available just in the repertoire. So we were building this brainstorm list of a cappella music, and Francis Pollock, our composer in residence, called me right after one of those brainstorming meetings and said, "Steve, I'd like to write a piece for each of your 20 young artists, a short micro piece for their voice a cappella." I said, "Francis, are you sure?" This was May. This was May 19th that Francis had this idea. And our season was going to be starting with pieces premiering and content going out online at the end of June. She said, "Yeah, I think that this is definitely something that I want to do, and I think that I can make it happen in the timeline." I said, "Okay, great, let's dive in."
We came up with the conceit that I would write 20 a cappella songs, one for each resident artist. And at that moment, Steve says, "I have the perfect collaborator to bring in to help with this project."
And that was when I thought of Jerry Dye, a wonderful playwright, actor, librettist, whose career in theater and in opera has been built around collecting oral histories, stories from people, and turning them into theatrical and now operatic pieces over the last 10 years.
I was pretty freaked out. I was overwhelmed by what the world looked like and where we were going, dealing with the uncertainty that all of us were dealing with at the time. And this project was just kind of this window opened, and I had the luxury of being virtually in Zoom rooms with all of these artists and conducting interviews. I've worked doing interview-based work probably my whole career in some way, shape, or form. And as of the past few years, I've been doing this in particular with opera. Conducting interviews and then pulling story, pulling narrative, pulling language from those actual interviews. And so we decided to go in that direction with this project.
The process then was to have Francis and Jerry together interview each of the 20 young artists. They scheduled a 45-minute Zoom call. Over the course of 4 days, they would interview all 20 of them at the very, very beginning of June, talking about what was going on in their lives.
Where are you? What does your life look like? Where in these grand United States are you? So many singers were having to move out of their apartment, and go home, live with family. We had people that were living in their childhood bedroom for the summer, trying to figure out what was happening next.
What this moment in 2020 meant to them as an artist, as a performer, in their growth.
We just had this incredible conversation about the state of the world and how we all as individuals had been living through it, and how it had affected our ability to make art and how we make art, and how really the pandemic and our isolation had influenced how we think of things that we had done every day as normal and how they had changed.
What was at stake? What were you scared of? What do you need? Where are you finding joy, which was important? What matters to you now that didn't matter to you before?
That was right around the time of George Floyd's murder. And so all the Black Lives Matter protests were starting to heat up. So of course, everything that was going on in the world entered into those conversations, those interviews.
We compared notes, compiled the notes, and then I went away and I wrote a song, the lyrics to a song that was roughly 2 to 3.5 minutes in length, and then sent that material to Francis.
Francis had essentially a week to write 2 or 3 pieces.
We would workshop a piece on Friday. Jerry would get me 2 to 3 texts over the weekend. And, by Monday or Tuesday, I was handing the pieces off to the singers.
The singers had 5 days to learn them.
And then the singer, Francis, myself, Steve, all met in a room with the amazing Chautauqua vocal coaches and workshopped the piece.
Francis would sometimes change things. Jerry would sometimes change things. Francis would have 3 days to make those edits. The singers would then have 1 week to polish the performance.
And then the final take was, here's your song, and find your capture. The capture, in a way, is this act of kind of giving it back to the singer and let them shape it in whatever way they want to.
And then we would take that process, that put in the titles, and then a week later it would premiere on the Chautauqua Assembly.
The cycle came together very organically, and from the beginning, we were trying to create the most authentic expression of what we had collectively been going through during the time of social isolation. And we were all on board with that goal from the beginning.
The language that I used is only the language shared inside the room. Sometimes you deviate with a word or something, some connective tissue, but very, very little. The goal is to try to capture the voice of the singer as much as possible so that you can kind of find the texture and the honesty in the conversation.
I'm sitting with myself these days, waiting for the song.
To suddenly have this piece created for me out of my own speech and my own thoughts by Jerry and Francis was just, it was magic.
In the world, day by day, silence speaks.
I've just been so blessed that Chautauqua was able to provide this avenue of creation. There's no way that we would have done this if we were in person. So I really just enjoyed creating a work, especially one that used my words. And I couldn't think of a better duo to put it together than Jerry and Francis.
I'm back home and you'll sit now. In the meantime, this family.
I feel so often we're just on a stage and, we're the voices that's there and we're the performers, but the audience never has a chance to really look at the artist, as a whole. And each of these songs, the words come from each artist, and each artist chose how they wanted to perform this piece. And, we were the directors of our own videos. And so this really captures who we are as artists. And yeah, I think the audience should really kind of look at that and see, oh, these are people behind the people that we see on the stage.
In my video, I'm wearing a traditional Tagalog barong, which is a Filipino formal wear, and it's made out of pineapple fibers. And I think that was just one thing, one personal touch that I would put into my piece. And then everyone had their own personal touch they put into theirs. I remember Eric Botto would have his dog that has gotten him through this quarantine and through a lot of life struggles. I remember just seeing the New York windows and my colleagues that were in New York and how they've gone through this time. It's a unique and beautiful way of getting to know the artists at a deeper level.
In classical music, we sing a lot of things that have been done for hundreds of years. And there's always this well, this person did it this way, and this person did it that way, or you could think about it as this. And to be given something that was just for me at a time, especially when I needed that connection to art the most, was really thrilling.
A song cycle is a collection of songs. It can be short, it could be 3, 4, 5, it could be 20. It's a form that has lived over the centuries and has meant different things over the course of centuries. Sometimes a song cycle will have text from the same poet or the same style of poetry. Other times it will be very diverse. Sometimes the composer will be setting poetry from their own culture, from their own language. Other times they'll be drawing it from elsewhere. And by collecting songs in a specific order, then a composer, a creator, will be able to create a longer, sometimes dramatic arc, sometimes a narrative arc. And it's been a form that composers have been drawn to for centuries.
In a song cycle, you always have your singer, but you also have an accompanying instrument. And so, whereas we had these 20 beautiful a cappella captures, we then needed to fill in the other side of the duo, and we employed the talents of Hilda Wong.
A lot of times as a young artist, you're often put into situations where you're supposed to work with your mentors or with older colleagues who are already more well established and you're the newbie. But this time was a very different experience because I was working with my peers and I really felt like they're equal. And so the opportunity to engage in artistic and creative dialogue with them was such a valuable and just such an experience that I treasured so much.
When Steve said that he wanted to take the song cycle even further, I said, I think that we need to engage the part of a song cycle that is inherently missing, which is the accompaniment figure that is always present, that is oftentimes taken for granted. I said, I think that if we use the pianist as, a through line, as a continuous character that weaves together each one of these 20 songs, then we not only, first of all, we not only connect everything, which is what we needed to do, but we also consider the song cycle and the fragmentation of collaboration, and how different it is during, this time.
My work was creating with Francis and with Jerry specifically the whole narrative and the arc of Hilda connecting all of the singers.
I was actually very happy to talk to Jerry Dye, the screenwriter, about this because I noticed that a lot of creatives and performers have very interesting and quite individual experiences of how they relate to their performing activity. And so I got to hear a little bit about how Jerry feels about all this. And in return, I got to share what I thought. And he turned this into this wonderful screenplay, which was very poetic for me because normally these things go on inside and you don't get to share them. You keep this inside until you get on stage and then you become a performer. But this was something different because this is an act of exposing what goes on inside and sharing that with everybody. I mean, it's similar to what's happening with showing the inside of my apartment and what happens inside my psychology as an individual, and then sharing what goes on as that connects with others in a social environment.
So we did go to New York to Hilda's apartment, me and Francis, and recorded her whole arc, which is kind of like analogous to the singers because she's in her own space alone, and trying to make music out of this, but in a way that we were telling like a narrative that would connect her to all the singers in the project.
In our silence, movement 2, scene 52B, take 1.
There hasn't been anything like this ever done before. Of course, COVID-19, this pandemic, has forced everybody into new ways of thinking, of creating, of imagining themselves as artists. And this song cycle particularly is a direct result of that. It is proving to be the inspiration for quite a number of projects that will be similar to this, but this was definitely the first time that that we've ever done anything like it.
I keep telling people that the work that I did this summer kind of saved my life in a way, because it activated those kind of more empathic parts of yourself. If I'm alone in a room at my desk with copious, my handwriting is horrible, by the way, but these copious, crazy making notes, I'm literally contemplating someone else's life and someone else's reality for however long it takes to build that song, and rearranging things and concocting and remembering, you know? And for me, it was such an intimate experience.
The thing that brings me so much joy and that I reflect on so much with people who are just hearing about the project is I reflect on the friendships that were formed through it. It's so interesting that with these young artists and working with the young artists and working with Jerry and working with Steve, my world in this time of pandemic has opened up, and I have all of these new friends. I continue to engage with young artists on social media. I called Max the other day. Michael Miller and I have been back and forth a little bit. And I think the thing that is so exciting to me is that the field is continuing to evolve, even though things don't look like they normally do.
In our work, especially as young artists, we're expected to know the standard rep, and we're killing ourselves trying to be perfect at that. And sometimes it's very hard to focus on who we are as artists and just true artistry, because we're trying to do it exactly by the book for each aria, and don't do a portamento here, and you can't breathe there. But with this piece and with this song cycle, there was so much freedom to be able to just, this is how I feel, and this is how I see this phrase, and these are my words. So I think we should be doing more of this, especially in different young artist programs, because that's where we are kind of shaping who we are as artists. And just it's a creative way to kind of figure out who you are as an artist, to sit down and say, okay, let's talk, and then we're going to take these words and we're going to make a whole piece out of just your words. I think that's just very freeing, and I think that more people would benefit from having an experience like this.
Our silence is a shared silence, but it also can be a space where we unite. And I am feeling really hopeful for this country and for our society right now.
When I play from my apartment and when the singers sing from their locations, we are all feeling together what it is to be alone, even though we're all apart. And I mean, that's just a beautiful way of illustrating how music can connect us. But not only music, but the silence can connect us. And the second thing is then that the silence is just as important a part of the music. And so I'm hoping that when you listen to this song cycle, you can appreciate what it takes for the silence between the individual songs and the silence between the piano interludes and the songs, what that will add to the experience of it. It will take a long time. It takes a long time. But sitting with it and being okay with being in peaceful quietness is part of the musical experience as well.
It was an incredibly fast and furious process, and one of the most rewarding things I have ever done.